A little bit of a change in scenery, don't worry, but let's get right into it. Let's finish off the rest in the New Testament. Book 13 and 14, we're going to talk about 1st and 2nd Thessalonians. Both were written by Paul with the purpose to encourage the church to continue in their new faith. Paul founded the church in Thessalonica on a previous missionary journey, and these letters contain a concern with the return of Christ. Now, the next two books, books 15 and 16, kind of take a shift. They're called the pastoral letters. And the content is geared towards the instructions about how the church should care for people and even how the church should function. Paul wrote this letter to Timothy, who was a young helper of Paul's. And because of Timothy's age, he's going to have some challenges in the church where he'll serve, which is actually the church in Ephesus. 1st and 2nd Timothy read like an instruction manual and were written between 64 and 67 AD. Titus, also part of the pastoral letters, is book 17. Paul gives instructions to Titus on how to manage the church in Crete, which is an island in the Mediterranean, and was written about the same time as the Timothy's, about 64 AD. Last of Paul's letters is to Philemon, book 18. Who was a member of the Colossian church in about 60 AD. The purpose was simple. Paul is encouraging him to forgive his slave and not mistreat him. While Philemon isn't widely read, it gives us a look on how Paul related to people and how he was a pastor to many all over the world. So the next set is the general letters, starting with Hebrews, the unknown author. There's been debate about it. Some believe it could have been Paul, some believe it could have been Luke, some could be Barnabas, some say it's one of Paul's students, and there's uncertainty from when it was written. We know it's before 70 AD, but there is no evidence to really solidify that. So the one thing is clear, though, is its message. The theme talks about sufficiency in Christ. The author writes to Jewish Christians to explain that Jesus is enough. The old traditions are unnecessary. Book 20 is James. Even as Jesus' brother, James didn't believe in him until after the resurrection. At that point, he became a leader in the early church and writes his letter to highlight the hypocrisy among the fellow Christians. He wrote about 49 to 50 AD, and it's set up very much similar to how Proverbs was. Next is 1st and 2nd Peter, and it's obvious that Peter wrote these. There was a great persecution going on in the Roman Empire against Christians, and even during this time, Peter was killed. But as Peter wrote both of these letters between 62 and 67 AD, Christians all over were being tortured and were suffering because of their faith, which sets the tone for his letters, focusing on encouragement for their suffering. The next three is 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. And a unique thing is that John doesn't have a direct audience. 1st John isn't addressed to anybody. 2nd John is addressed to a chosen lady. And 3rd John is addressed to Gaius. And even 2nd and 3rd John are really short too. But all of these letters speak on the themes of love, truth, and are laced with warnings not to be swept away by false teachings. Next is Jude. Jude was also a brother of Jesus, and like James, didn't believe in him from the start. Jude wrote in 65 AD, and similar to 2nd and 3rd John, it only has one chapter, and the theme is just to avoid all evil doers and do good. The last book is book 27, Revelation, the lone prophetic book of the New Testament. It's been studied for years as a book that could show what the end times would look like. The true theme of Revelation, though, is hope. As Christians have suffered and been persecuted for their faith, Revelation offers a look at the results of what was shown as a glorious hope in Christ, an eternal hope in heaven, and a reason to worship. John records these words as they were given to him by Jesus as he was held in captivity on Patmos. So now we have just spent 4 straight sessions talking about the books of the Bible. Round of applause for all of you who have stuck with me through these last sessions. Now I'm sure you're asking what you need to do with all this information, and I'm happy to announce we're covering that in the next session in the finale of Bible Basics. As always, stay blessed.